Hey guys, it's Jay Cavallaro. Thanks for visiting my channel. If you're trying to find my spiritual channel, Faith Evolved, just go to faithevolved.com and check it out, see if you like it. But on this channel, today I want to talk about my favorite albums of all time, starting from 1983 when I was born. And these are the albums that have personally changed my life and inspired me to become a singer and guitar player myself, and just made me happy. So since I'll be covering about 37 years worth of material here, I'm going to try to move quickly. And although there are some years that I have a tie between two different bands that I couldn't, decide which one was better, usually most years have just one album from one band. Alright, so let's get going here. 1983, the year it all began for me. Hey, it's a music video, gotta rhyme somewhere. So, of course, this has to be one of the tie years because, honestly, it's the year I was born. And although I was born in December, mid-December, so the year was almost over, I barely made the cut, but you know what? It's all good. Even though these albums came out before I was born, they still count in my opinion. And one band on this list is actually the band that got me into music in the first place. The band that inspired me to start playing guitar and singing. Of course, if you know me, you know this band already. It's Petra. And they came out with their album, Not of This World. And as soon as you hit play on that album, you hear that keyboard synthesizer intro. And then right when that intro is over, you hear that guitar riff right into Bema Seat. You know it's going to be a good album. And they're just stellar songs. It's amazing songwriting, great lyrics. And it just, gets better and better with each release. The other band and album on this list, tied in 1983, is Barnabas, Approaching Light Speed. And I wished that when I heard that album for the first time, I was blown away by the guitar tone, by how heavy it was. I mean, there was nobody playing like that stuff back in the Christian rock world in 1983. I mean, Stryper had just really started, practicing as Rock's Regime in 83. And there wasn't anybody really besides Resurrection Band, maybe Servant, that was playing anything near as heavy as they were. So they're probably the heaviest or the hardest rocking Christian band back in 83. And just the guitar tone, the synthesizer effects, the drums, and the soaring vocals of Nancy Jo Mann. I mean, it's just amazing classic Christian rock right there. So in 1984, of course, again making the list is Petra with their album Beat the System. And although there's plenty of other fantastic albums that came out in '84, like Ride the Lightning by Metallica, or the Yellow and Black Attack by Stryper, plenty of great albums that came out. The reason why this one made the list as the most influential album is because, again, Petra was the band that got me into music and playing guitar in the first place. And I just loved the change in direction. They went from more of a classic rock to more of a new wave / arena rock kind of sound as they evolved throughout the 80s. And this album marked the drastic change in the sound, and it worked, in my opinion. In 1985, Stryper came out with Soldiers Under Command, which in my opinion is probably their best album of all time. And still, even today, as they're releasing new albums, nothing touches the amazing musicianship and songwriting and just the guitar tone, everything that album had. It's definitely their best. I think most people would agree. And that was one of the albums that got me into heavy metal back in the early 90s when I wasn't even 10 at that point in time. Maybe I was 10 or 11 when I first started hearing Stryper, and I was blown away by how much more heavy and how much more metal they were than Petra. So 1986, and I just want to give a little disclaimer here. I grew up in a Christian home, listening to Christian rock and CCM and then Christian metal eventually. And so this list would probably have contained all Christian rock and metal bands until, maybe about 15 years ago when I started expanding my taste and listening to, secular bands and started to enjoy them as well. And I don't really call myself a Christian anymore, although I am definitely a believer in God. My tastes have more expanded since then. So you'll start seeing secular bands, and I use the air quotes here, spattered throughout this list and more so as we go on. So, of course, it's the first secular band being Metallica's Master of Puppets, which, is a masterpiece thrash metal album that came out in that year. And, of course, that guitar tone, the guitar solos, the songwriting is impeccable. Nobody can come close. Nobody can touch that album. Definitely makes my top album of 1986. 1987. You're going to see this band a few more times on this list. for, obvious reasons, but Petra, This Means War. I remember the first time I heard that, the drums at the beginning of that album, and then this amazing, it's like, I think John Schlitt was at his peak with his voice there. It was just raspy and powerful and just intense. And he hit those high notes. It's just amazing. And then, of course, he conquered. Again, another uplifting, amazing song with a great guitar solo from Bob Hartman. And it just continues on in that fashion throughout the whole album. Just, they got better. In my opinion, this is the peak of Petra, the peak of John Schlitt. This is really the best they have to offer, besides maybe a couple other albums that you'll also hear on this list going forward. All right, so 1988 now, and it would be so easy for me to put Petra's On Fire on this list here, but I don't want to, have all the albums from here until 2003 be Petra, because they easily could be, most of them anyway. But this album really does make the cut, and this is Sacred Warrior's Rebellion, and that was my, one of my first exposures to power metal. Now this is, 80s power metal, it's not the same as today's. But back then, it was, just the guitar playing, the intricate songwriting, the solos, and of course, Ray Parra's amazing vocal range and abilities. It just blew me away, and I had to put that album on my top spot for 88. All right, so in 1989, Petra did again release an album, and it was a pretty good rock worship album, but not quite as good as Whiteheart's Freedom. And people argue that Petra had their all-star lineup, their best lineup of musicians from the late 80s to early 90s, and I would agree with that. And I think Whiteheart also had their all-star lineup in 1989. And it perfectly culminated in this album, which has a perfect array of, hard rock songs and just more lighter, maybe mid-pace songs and even some amazing ballads. I mean, Let It Go. I mean, what an amazing song that is. And, of course, the song Let the Kingdom Come, which has an amazing, crescendo of just, the bass and then the singing and then the guitar at the end. Just absolutely blew my mind when I first heard that. Sing Your Freedom. I mean, come on. I mean, the songs are just absolutely amazing. And it just, I wish that they kept their guitar player. He ended up leaving, and then I think Brian was the guy who replaced him. And they, some people could say that they kept continuing in their peak after that, which I would agree. But that album was just perfect, in my humble opinion. 1990. We're in the 90s now, and of course, Petra had to make the list on this one because, Beyond Belief. Folks, Beyond Belief. That is probably one of their best albums. And just, they turned up the guitars, they turned up the guitar solos, the songwriting got even better, and just, overall, just turned into almost a quasi-metal band at this point. And put out some amazing music videos. That album definitely inspired me, definitely moved me back when I was, probably not even 10 years old yet when I first started listening to Petra. 1991, and this is the last time, unfortunately, that you're going to see Petra on this list. This is the last time Petra released an album that was really borderline heavy metal, except maybe their Jekyll and Hyde 2003 album. And of course, you start off with Destiny, you have Ready, Willing, and Able, you have Dance, it's amazing guitar tone, although not as good as Beyond Belief, but still pretty heavy. John Schlitt's vocals are he's still in his peak with his singing abilities, and he has some pretty good, mid-pace songs in this album as well, like I Need to Hear From You, you have In the Likeness of You, and Hey World. Man, that song gives me goosebumps every time I listen to it. Just take a look at the lyrics, and then listen to that song, and it's just absolutely amazing. All right, so 1992, of course, there's plenty of metal bands that could have made the list here, but, in the 90s, I was, listening to a lot of contemporary Christian music. And one of my favorite bands of that time is a band called PFR. And in my opinion, their self-titled album, Pray for Rain, is, the best album of that year of all the albums I've listened to. Simply because Joel Hansen is an amazing songwriter. Of course, the lyrics are uplifting, and the music is impeccable, and you can tell he's inspired by the Beatles. And you don't hear people writing songs like this anymore. These are real melodic, songs with singable melodies that you just don't hear on the radio anymore these days. And after that album, they kept releasing albums that sounded better and better and better. And I was bummed when they disbanded in 97 and then shortly reunited to make an album ironically titled Disappear in 2001. And then, they had the Bookhouse recordings, and then who knows what happened after that. But Joel Hansen did release a few solo albums as well, which are pretty good too. All right, so 1993, of course, Petra could have made the list here because their album Wake Up Call was absolutely amazing. But I wanted to put a band here that had more of an impact on me in my evolution from just hard rock and classic rock to more metal and more technical metal. Specifically, Believer's Dimensions album. And of course, they were already doing some technical stuff on Sanity Obscure, and there's other technical thrash metal bands that are out there. Like Death was doing some technical stuff too, but nobody was doing what Believer was doing at that time. Like I never heard of like their songs where they're incorporating classical elements and violins and stuff like that. They were one of the few Christian bands that were kind of ahead of their time, kind of like Vengeance Rising was in '87. And that album, just the off timing, his time signatures and the drumming and just the guitar riffs and stuff, and the discordant and the harmonies mixed together, especially in the song Dementia. I mean, I just, that album gave me goosebumps and just blew me away when I first heard that. All right, so in '94, this is only one of two times I have a solo artist on the list instead of a band. So I'm kind of breaking the rule here, although I'd never really set any rule that it had to be a band from the start. Anyway, this is Michael Sweet, formerly of Stryper, now back in Stryper, and doing solo stuff still. Anyway, when I first heard his self-titled album in '94, I was pretty impressed. I really loved it. The songwriting, the singing. He sounded like his voice was at his peak. He was sounding more manly, not so girly back in some of the, at least some of the ballads he did back with Stryper, or some of the slower songs. So I thought it was good. I thought it was some of his best work since Soldiers Under Command, honestly. And so ever since then, I've been keeping track of Michael Sweet and listening to his music, and his music has inspired me just as much as John Schlitt has inspired me from Petra. Speaking of John Schlitt, well, it's 1995, and that was the year he came out with his album Shake, and that shook the world. Not because the album was so great, even though it was, but people thought he was quitting Petra because they were coming out with No Doubt. And on that album, you see all these new faces, and Bob Hartman's gone, even though he wrote the songs and played guitar on the album. But his face is gone. He's not touring anymore. What's going on here? And John Schlitt releases Shake and then Unfit for Swine in '96, and there's rumors that he quit, but no, he didn't. We all know that. He kept going with Petra and pretty much stayed until the end. That was that album when that came out, when I started hearing the intro to that song and the guitar riff, and him starting to sing. It sounded like what Petra should have sounded like in 1995. Not No Doubt, even though it's a great album. I wanted to hear more of the classic kind of like 80s and arena rock type sound that John Schlitt held on to for a little bit longer in 1995 before changing over to a newer style with Unfit for Swine, which was still better than No Doubt. Sorry. Not sorry. All right, so 1996. Of course, I could have put John Schlitt's Unfit for Swine here, and it would have been a worthy contender. But I wanted to put something a little different because I thought this was, a perfect rock album for the mid-90s. And this is Audio Adrenaline's Bloom. And in my humble opinion, it was a nice throwback sound to like a 70s classic rock mixed with modern rock. And it was a perfect blend. The songs are amazing, great songwriting, strong structures, singable melodies. It was a perfect rock album for 1996. All right, so 1997. And this was another time that White Heart made the list. And this is probably their softest album, and probably the softest record on this entire list, as far as guitar tone and songwriting goes. And this is their album Redemption, and the songwriting was so good that I had to put it on this list. And although of course there's other worthy contenders, rock and metal bands alike, because this album was their last album, it has a little bit of nostalgia piece. I wish they kept going as a band, but they broke up right after that album. All right, so 1998, and you're going to start noticing a lot more heavier metal bands on this list going forward. And I think my theory is in 1998, shortly after I hit puberty and became more of a man, enjoyed more aggressive, edgier music. I don't know. It could be completely off base with that, but it's something fun to think about. And that's when Extol's Burial came out. And when I first heard Burial, I was blown away. I had never heard anything like that before. A lot of the music I was listening to was more, just straight ahead thrash or speed metal. I wasn't really into death metal, and the death metal bands I was into was like Mortification, and they were fun, but I haven't heard anything quite as melodic and just powerful as Extol at that point, and technical too, besides maybe Believer. And then when I found out they're from Norway, it kind of made sense, because a lot of the bands you're going to hear going forward on this list. Many of them hail from like Norway and Sweden, and I discovered that my favorite music now kind of hails from that part of the world, because they still maintain a lot of melody in their song structures versus stuff you hear in America. All right, 1999, we have another European band. This is Balance of Power, and I believe this might be only the second secular metal band on this list so far. But when I first heard Balance of Power and Lance King's singing specifically, I was blown away. I think he has the perfect power metal voice, especially the way he sings on 10 More Tales of Grand Illusion, and that's the album that they came out with that year. And when the way I heard him sing that, I was like, wow, that guy's voice is so versatile and so like unique. And just the songwriting is amazing, the guitar tone, the guitar solos. It's just that's when I really started getting into power metal. All right, so 2000, Extol makes the list again with their second album, Undeceived, and they upped their game with this one. The guitar tone is so much heavier, so much beefier production, and just a thrash. It's just awesome, and then you hear more of the singing as well. I think from the guitar player, and it was a perfect thrash death metal album from that time frame. All right, in 2001, this is gonna be a little different because this is the only album on this entire list that is not straight ahead rock or metal, and it is Reliant K's The Anatomy of the Tongue in Cheek, a pop punk album that was released in 2001. And when I first heard it, I was blown away. Like, I didn't realize pop punk could be this good, and just the songwriting, the song structure, the way, the singing, the lyrics, just how witty and thoughtful they were and funny sometimes. I mean, I just remember sitting in my car when I was 17 years old, my first car, had just got my license, driving down the road, jamming to Sadie Hawkins Dance and jamming to Breakdown and having my car break down shortly there. No, but it was just goosebumps and just happy, good feeling music, Like, if all pop punk bands could write stuff like that, I'd probably listen to it more. That was, to me, the quintessential perfect pop punk album that was ever released, and probably the only one that I really ever listened to anyway. All right, so 2002, we have Nightwish, another band that in my later years, in my 20s and 30s, that I really started getting into when I started really delving into a lot of the European, specifically Norway and Sweden, bands from that area. And Nightwish just blows me away. Like, the songwriting is impeccable, and that, to me, that's the biggest thing. It's not just a good song, but the songwriting, like just the way it's all put together with this all the details filled in on every single part of the song, just nothing going to waste. With the orchestration, the keyboardist, forget his name at the moment, but he's just absolutely amazing at writing songs. And just, having of course Tarja as a lead singer, one of my favorite operatic female vocalists, and then you have Thomas, is that his name? The bass player, and he sings too. And unfortunately, he left the band this year. I'm bummed because he had one of the most amazing, like, raspy, almost power metal-esque voices that I ever heard. And just hearing him sing side by side with her, it's just absolutely amazing. It's like two completely different types of singers, but they both work so well with each other. And it's too bad they had some drama and she left, and neither here nor there. That album, when I first heard the songs on that album, I was blown away. I just love the orchestration. I love the way everything just all flows together so perfectly, and there's like no words. You just have to listen to it. All right, so the metal onslaught continues here. In 2003, I have a theory about what this particular act, and I think that maybe sometime in the maybe late 80s, early 90s, there was a boy born in Sweden or Finland or Norway, and he was stolen in the middle of the night and kidnapped, brought to the Americas, specifically Atlanta, Georgia, and Matt Smith appeared and came on the scene with Theocracy's self-entitled album in 2003, and blew me away. I never heard anything so melodic out of the United States. You would think this guy was out of the UK or Finland, Sweden, Norway, something over in Europe, but no, this guy was in Atlanta, Georgia. How dare he come up with such amazing music being an American? No. And I thought it was absolutely amazing. Not only is he writing such amazing music, he's doing it all himself. He's playing the guitar, playing the bass, doing the drum machine, layering the vocals, coming up with amazing choruses, like 30, 40, 50 layered voices in some parts of the music, and just recording it himself, producing it, just everything. He did it himself and released it. And it just blew everybody away. And of course, everybody in the Christian metal community knows the guy now, and he's got a band, and they've released several albums since then, and just absolutely amazing. Like I hope I get to meet the guy someday or play with him on stage someday. That guy, Matt Smith, respect, bro. All right, so now in 2004, we have again Nightwish, blowing me away once again with their amazing songwriting. Thomas Halopian, is that how he pronounced his name? The keyboardist is absolutely knows how to write a really good song and fill in all the details and just make it sound just epic. And I almost love how it sounds like it could be in a movie soundtrack or something like that. Just absolutely amazing songwriting. And again, once again, Tarja with the best female operatic voice, in my humble opinion, in all of heavy metal. And again, I think this is the last album that she was on before leaving the band. But yeah, I mean, to me, that was when they were at their peak. All right, so 2005, we have something a little different. This is a band you probably wouldn't expect to see on a metalhead's list, but you know what? I know another metalhead that likes this band, and there's probably a few other metalheads that secretly like them, and it's Disturbed. And this is one of those albums that I got in the mail. I think Columbia CDs or whatever. It was one of those ads you get in the mail, or you pay 99 cents and you get a CD, and then you get hooked to getting more CDs and don't realize it, and then you don't pay for it. Then it goes to collections and they come after you. It was one of those things, but I was impressed. I was they're not like considered a metal band, but they're about as close to metal as you can get without actually being a metal band. As far as the music goes, I mean, they know how to write a song. They're kind of like, honestly, they're kind of like Nickelback. You love to hate them, but they write some good songs, and and with a good hook and good, something you can sing along to. And I loved almost every single song on the album, which to me is hard to do. So yeah, that's definitely gonna make the list for 2005. 2006. This is a tie year because both these albums have a really special place in my heart. Because they're not album, one of them is not an album you'd really think of as making the list, but I thought it was absolutely amazing and so underrated. That is Bride's Skin for Skin. Yes, Bride, the guys who wrote, Snakes in the Playground, and and all that's kind of, music back in the early 90s. Well, they kind of, went off the deep end, did some, I don't know if you want to call it new metal or just like alternative rock, and just they did all these things. They went off on a tangent and tried all these different styles, but they found their groove in 2006 with Skin for Skin. Like, to me, that is their best album besides Snakes in the Playground, because they just really mix like a dark, edgy sounding blues sound, with Dale Thompson's just gritty, raspy vocals and amazing songwritings, amazing hooks. I mean, to me, that's like one of the perfect blues-based rock metal albums out there. And tied is Pyramaze's Legend of the Bone Carver. And that was when I first heard Lance King outside of Balance of Power, and I was, super impressed with the amazing songwriting, the just aggressive guitar playing and drumming, and just, that to me is like probably one of the most perfect power metal albums of all time. And it's just like they haven't been able to release anything close to that since. And honestly, I haven't really heard much close to that since either from any other type of power metal band. All right, 2007. Here's another band that you should probably expect to see earlier in my list. Not so much later, and that's Deliverance. Yes, the ones who came out with Deliverance and Weapons of Our Warfare and What a Joke and all those, amazing albums from the late 80s, early 90s that they're so well known for. But my favorite album by Deliverance is As Above, So Below. And shortly after that, State of Execution. Not their early stuff, because, again, I'm more about melody. I'm more about hook. I'm more about songwriting. And honestly, As Above, So Below has all of it. And it's heavy as heck. And the drumming is absolutely amazing. Like, nothing from their earlier stuff comes close to the drumming on this album. And the heaviness of the guitar tone blows everything else out of the water. So that's why that is on my list for 2007. 2008, of course, Theocracy has to make the list for that year. Of course, there are other bands that come out with great albums that year, but I mean, come on. Matt Smith knows how to write a song. It's heavier. It's edgier. He's even got like a little bit of thrash mixed in there. with Laying the Demon to Rest. I mean, just absolutely astonishing songwriting. You can sing along to almost every single song. Love it. Had to make the list. All right, we are now at 2009, and we're starting to come up on a period where I have a hard time choosing, because as I get older, I find myself stuck in my ways and listening to a lot of bands that were around in the 80s and 90s that are still together making new music. And Stryper is one of those bands who came back after being disbanded for a few years. They came back with Reborn, which honestly was my least favorite album by them, even though some of the songwriting is good. It was originally a Michael Sweet album and should have stayed that way, and is now recorded that way apparently. But anyways, Murder by Pride was definitely an improvement, and still not quite in the groove that they're eventually going to come into with No More Hell to Pay. But with this album, it's the best album that I heard that year, because I couldn't really find any other in my list of artists and bands, that really had any quality albums that year. It was kind of like a weird transition period. But Murder by Pride has some really great, just the guitar tone, songwriting. Michael Sweet, I love the guitar solo on Four Leaf Clover. I love, the way he sings I Believe. It's just so emotional and powerful. It's a good album. And, and that was probably the best album of that year, in my humble opinion. All right, we're in the 2010s now. And again, we're still in that transition period where I had a hard time finding, a favorite. So I put this band in here with an asterisk next to it, because I was trying to find another band to put there, but I'm going to go with it, because honestly, I was always trying to find if there was a Christian band that was sounded like Nightwish. And this is about as close as you're going to get. And that's HB. And nobody knows what it stands for. Is it Holy Bible? We're not really quite sure what it stands for, but they came out with the Jesus Metal Explosion. And I just love the sound. They really nailed their sound. And the female vocalist, she's beautiful and a beautiful singer. And, now, even though I'm not traditional Christian anymore, I appreciated the Christian and uplifting lyrics that they were writing versus, a lot of the other darker type stuff that comes out of, the Scandinavian area. So I believe they're from Norway. And yeah, HB released a few albums before disbanding, and I thought they did a pretty bang up job for a Christian metal band. All right, in 2011, here's another band. You're noticing a trend here that, released an album later in their career, past their supposed heyday or when they were popular. This is Believer, and this is my favorite album by them. It's called Transhuman. And although their best album overall is probably Dimensions from '93, they broke up for a while and then came back together. And when they came back together, they upped their game a little bit as far as production and as far as vocaling. Because honestly, Kurt Bachman never sang on any of the old stuff, and on his newer stuff, he's actually a pretty good singer. And I wish he sang more. He still does screaming sometimes too, but he does a great combination of singing and screaming. And then Joey Dobbs' drumming is second to none. And that album, I just love concept albums, and especially this is about transhumanism and AI taking over, and it's just got a nice eerie kind of vibe to it, and it's just fun. All right, 2012, and I'm excited about this one because this is probably one of my favorite albums of any band ever, and probably one of my favorite musicians too, Tommy Johansson of Rankseed. And that's when they came out with their best album, in my humble opinion, the perfect power metal album, maybe progressive, power metal, cinematic, movie soundtrack metal, whatever you want to call it. It's like the perfect combination of everything in one album, and it never fails to give me goosebumps. Never fails to pull me out of a funk anytime I put it on. I mean, and Tommy Johansson's voice is absolutely amazing. His songwriting ability is second to none. There's nobody writing anything close to as good as anything Tommy Johansson writes. And I'm not just talking, song structures, but melodies and lyrics, and just his lyrics could be better if he was, if he had an English songwriter, but still, they're fun. It's power metal. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I just love the fact that the concept of it, like he's doing all these different movies, Marvel movies and stuff like that, and stuff like Back to the Future and the Terminator. Just all these different movies that he's writing songs about, and he just puts it together in such a perfect way. Everything's filled in, so much melody. I just love it. And guess what? They're out of Sweden. Go figure. That's where all the good music comes from. 2013, Rank Seed strikes again. I didn't even have to look up because there's definitely other bands that could have easily made the list. But if Rank Seed released an album that year, I mean, they're going on the list. Now, yes, they released stuff before that, but they really started sounding good around Welcome to the Theater, and then of course in 2013, A New World. Not as cinematic and movie soundtrack-ish as the previous one, but still very melodic. A lot of orchestration. Amazing vocals, amazing songwriting, guitar solos, off the hook. I mean, this guy has it all. I mean, this guy's like the Matt Smith of of power metal, basically in Sweden. All right, 2014, and you're gonna start seeing some artists on this list that are more recent because it's hard to find older acts still writing good music today. So on this list, 2014, we have Symmetry. I just recently discovered them, I think about 2.5 years ago. And, typically as you get older, you kind of get more set in your ways and not as impressed with new music. But they definitely convinced me. Per Nielsen, the guitar player, songwriter of that band, he knows how to write amazing songs. And his guitar playing, ability is just staggering. Like some of the solos he comes up with, some of the melodies, some of the scales he plays. Like I don't even know where he comes up with these melodies. It's absolutely amazing. And of course, when I found out he was inspired by Alan Holdsworth, which is is an amazing jazz fusion player who passed away a few years ago, like that impressed me too. And I remember going on his page once and saying, because I'm his friend on Facebook, like, hey, you're as good as Alan Holdsworth, and he got offended. He's like, no way, I'm not as good as Alan Holdsworth. Are you kidding me? The guy's a god or something like that. He didn't say he was a god, but he was like floored that I compared him to Alan Holdsworth, because that's literally how I found Alan Holdsworth, by knowing he was inspired by him. Anyway, long story short, Symmetry, I really hope they come up with a new album because their music is absolutely amazing. All right, 2015. I had to put an asterisk next to this one because I was, again, having a hard time finding a band that's that's still writing music today that I listened to back in the 80s and 90s, or it's worthy of being on this list. And there are a few bands, but they didn't have any albums that year. So I put Nightwish, Endless Forms, Most Beautiful, and there are certainly some good songs on that album, but it's probably my least favorite of all the albums on this entire list of favorites, if that makes any sense. All right, we're now in 2016, and Matt Smith strikes again with another fantastic release from Theocracy with their album Ghost Ship. And yeah, once again, they don't disappoint. Amazing songwriting, the beefy, crunchy guitar tones, amazing drumming. His vocals are just absolutely amazing. Again, they sound like someone that should, or some band that should be from Europe or something like that. This amazing. And they actually decided to do a contest that year to see who, wanted to do a cover of Ghost Ship. Either they could sing it or play it on the piano, guitar, or whatever, and send it in. And I actually tied first place with one other person. And they sent me like a free CD and a record and a T-shirt. And I was very happy with that, very honored. If you want to see that cover, it's in the description. If you want to just click on the link in the description. But yeah. The only reason they're because they have 4 albums that are full-length albums they've done, and the only reason why their other one, As the World Bleeds, is not on the list is because, well, that was 2011 when Believer released Transhuman, so I had to bump them off there. But yeah, I can't wait. They're supposed to be releasing a new album soon, and I'm sure they'll probably be contenders for whatever year that is, maybe 2022. All right, 2017. This was the hardest year for me to choose because it just really wasn't anything good. 2017 was a dud for metal. And I'm not listening to Christian rock much anymore. So yeah, the only thing I could find that was even worthy of putting on this list was Believer. Once again, they released 1 of 5, 2 of 5, and 3 of 5, which are really supposed to be on one album eventually, but they're like EPs. So those 6 songs they released in 2017 were the best songs I heard that year, which is why they're on this list. And they kind of toned down a little bit. They're not as thrashy and heavy as they were before, but the songwriting is still there. We're now in 2018. We're getting close to the end of the list. If you're still here, thank you very much for watching. And this is a band I just discovered not even a year ago. And they have 2 spots on this list. And honestly, they're probably on the top 5, which is really, really, for someone who's 37 years old to be a new band come out with music recently and be put in my top 5, you gotta be good. This is a band called Amaranth, and they released an album called Helix, which isn't even their best album. It's probably one of their worst albums of all their albums, and all their albums are pretty dang good. And it still is better than anything else in 2018. Check out Helix and just listen to the just awesome, mix of just like a metalcore and a little bit of thrash, a little bit of death with the vocals, a little bit of everything. A female singer, and you have actually 3 lead singers in the band. You have a female lead singer, a male lead singer who does clean vocals, and you have a male lead singer who does the harsh vocals. And it's just an amazing combination of all 3 types of singing styles and melodies, and that the songwriting is that again, that's probably the biggest reason they're on this list, because they know how to write songs with good hooks. And Amaranth definitely deserves a spot for 2018. All right, 2019. Well, it's technically a different band name, but it's really the same band. It's Rank Seed, now known as Majestica. They released their first album under that name, and of course, there's no contest. It had to go on that spot. Plus, there's not really anybody else writing anything nearly as good as that in 2019 anyways, but Above the Sky just blew me away. Of course, watching that music video and just seeing how much fun they're having. They're just fun guys that know how to write good music. And like, where are these people? Like, why is there like nobody doing that in the United States besides maybe Matt Smith with Theocracy? I mean, come on. I need to start a band. But seriously, that's right there. It's like, again, power metal done right with this amazing, songwriting, the soaring vocals and the melodies, and you can sing along to every single song. And it's just you can't go wrong. It just never disappoints. Anytime anything Tommy Johansson touches turns to gold. And last but not least, we have 2020. And that is, again, Amaranth hitting the spot with their newest album, Manifest. And again, I just can't get over how amazing their songwriting is, and just how well it's produced in the videos that they do, the music videos. They have it down to a science. And for me to put them in the top 5, like I said before, I mean, how do you do that? How do you convince an old fart like me? I'm not really old, but I mean, I should be set in my ways, and all the new music that these kids are coming out with today should piss me off. But no, Amaranth. I would, if I could go see them in live in concert, I would fly to Europe right now to see them. And of course, guess what? They're from Sweden. Who knew? All the good music comes from freaking Scandinavia, and there's like nothing besides Theocracy. There's like nothing good around here. So yeah, I mean, I just love the song, like that song "Virus" or "Viral," like how it talked about not giving into the fear of the virus, like right around the pandemic and the coronavirus, and then kind of with the song "Boom," which I don't really like the music video. It's a little violent, but it's fun. They know how to have fun, and and it's like kind of like talking out against all the propaganda and stuff, and just like the politics. They're sick of it. They just want to be real. I wish they were my friends. They seem like cool people. And they know how to write some good music. Yeah, Amaranth. I mean, I'm just shocked at how it's like they're up there with Majestica / Rank Seed, in my humble opinion. They're like top 5 for probably forever now. All right, that's it. It's 2021. We're more than halfway through the year, but I still haven't found anything I like yet that's been released so far. I'm hoping that at least some band that I like that's on this list releases some kind of like EP or some kind of single or something like that, so I can pick something this year. But it might not happen. I might have to like discover another band that I haven't discovered yet, and then amend the list when I do a new list someday. So, anyways. I'm probably gonna end up keeping this list the way it is, though. I can't imagine any bands. I mean, there's always ties and stuff like that. But I think this list here is gonna be the list that I maintain the rest of my life. But you never know. I've discovered new artists as recently as this year or late last year. Really, technically, December 31st is the day I found Amaranth. So yeah, you never know. Anyways, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. God bless.